Episode 13, Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. Hey y'all, I'm Heather, and this is Poison Appalachia, the dark side of Appalachia. As always, thanks for listening. I thought the Railroad Tunnels one last week was pretty fun. At least it was fun for me to research and record. Hopefully it was fun to listen to. Today I want to talk about one of the most haunted places in America, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in Weston, West Virginia. I know I do a lot of West Virginia stuff and kind of wanted to explain myself. If you haven't been with me since the beginning, I mentioned this in the first episode, but I live right across the river from West Virginia. So I know a lot of stuff that has happened in West Virginia. Other parts of the Appalachia, not so much. So if you have some legend or some true crime story or disaster that has happened in your part of Appalachia, please let me know. I would love to cover all of Appalachia. Also, West Virginia is a spooky state, evidently, because a lot of creepy stuff occurs there. Maybe it's the mountains, I don't know. But that's why a majority of my stories are in West Virginia. I try to kind of separate it and put other states in, but I do know I'm pretty heavy-handed on the West Virginia stuff. For those of you who listen to the West Virginia Lobotomy Project, I mentioned the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in that episode. Also, is that not the coolest name for a place? It sounds like something from a movie or a book. It was one of the 4 mental institutions in West Virginia, and the largest of the 4. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was built in the town of Weston, West Virginia. When construction started, it was actually in Virginia. But the Civil War occurred before its completion, and then West Virginia became a state, so now it's in West Virginia. Weston is a city in the county seat of Lewis County, West Virginia. Side note, Lewis County is adjacent to Braxton County, and if you'll remember, that's where the Flatwoods Monster was. But let's go back to Weston. Weston was founded in 1818 as Preston. The name was changed to Flesherville soon after, and then Weston in 1819. The city was incorporated in 1846, or maybe 1913. One website I was reading said that one thing, and the other one said the other date. So, I guess take your pick. And I guess it really doesn't matter when it was incorporated, just that it was incorporated, I guess. The West Virginia Tourism website says Weston is an ideal family getaway. Conveniently located at the intersection of 2 major highways, you'll be within minutes of everything that the area has to offer. Catch paranormal encounters with a visit to an old asylum, the Trans-Allegheny Asylum. Stay at the award-winning resort, dine in a charming bistro, or dig in at an old-time diner. This area, known as Stonewall Country, offers the best fishing, golfing, boating, and other outdoor activities. So let's go a bit into the history of the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. According to the website, it says that it was constructed between 1858 and 1881. The largest hand-cut stone masonry design in North America, and is purportedly the second largest in the world next to the Kremlin. It was designed by the renowned architect Richard Andrews, following the Kirkbride plan, which called for long, rambling wings arranged in a staggered formation, assuring that each of the connecting structures received an abundance of therapeutic sunlight and fresh air. I was reading about the Kirkbride plan when researching for this, and it's super interesting. And I feel like he was a bit ahead of his time, but I don't want to go into the detail of it because it's probably not that interesting. But if you want to check it out, you can always look it up online. There's a lot about it on Wikipedia and different places. The original hospital, designed to house 250 patients, was opened to patients in 1864 and reached its peak in the 1950s with 2,400 patients in overcrowded and generally poor conditions. Changes in the treatment of mental illnesses and the physical deterioration of the facility forced its closure in 1994, inflicting a devastating effect on the local economy, which it still has yet to recover from. A little history on mental patients in general. Prior to the mid-1800s, mental patients were treated abhorrently. Many people thought they were demons or possessed. Many patients were thought to be witches and killed. A lot of patients were jailed with criminals, especially if their family didn't want to take care of them. They were abused and mistreated. The ones that stayed with their family weren't treated much better. They were usually hidden away from everyone, and always the family embarrassment. The crazy aunt or uncle that no one talked about. Probably would be me. All of that changed when Dorothea Dix came along. She was an American advocate on behalf of the indigent mentally ill, who through a vigorous and sustained program of lobbying state legislatures and the United States Congress created the first generation of American mental asylums. Finally, the mentally ill had a place to go where they could get better care and compassion. Well, to a certain extent. I wouldn't say they were treated all that good, but they were definitely treated better than they had ever had been before. So with the creation of the mental asylum and the design of the Kirkbride plan, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was a good place for its time. Construction began in late 1858 and was initially conducted by prison laborers. Most of the building materials were sourced, most notably from blue sandstone from a quarry in Mount Clair, West Virginia, and because of this, skilled stonemasons from Germany and Ireland were employed. Construction was interrupted by the outbreak of the American Civil War in 1861. Following the secession of the state of Virginia from the United States, the government demanded the return of the hospital's unused construction funds for its defense. However, before this could occur, the 7th Ohio Volunteer Infantry seized the money from a local bank, delivering it to Wheeling. This money was set aside for use by the Virginia government, who remained loyal to the Union, also known as the Restored Government of Virginia. While construction was attempted during the war, the grounds and buildings were often occupied by both Union and Confederate military, and building supplies were taken by the Confederate raiders. Following the mission of West Virginia as a state in 1863, the hospital was renamed the West Virginia Hospital for the Insane. At the end of the war, the completion of the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was prioritized. Consequently, while so many other towns were financially ruined by the war and would remain destitute for a decade, Weston did not experience a post-war depression. Business boomed as the asylum established itself as a primary economic resource for the town. The first patients were admitted in October 1864, but construction continued into 1881. The 200-foot central clock tower was completed in 1871, and separate rooms for the people of color were completed in 1873. From the beginning, the hospital was largely self-sufficient. They raised their own vegetables, maintained a dairy herd, and operated an ice plant. A nearby coal mine supplied fuel for the heat, and there was a reservoir for water. All the patients' clothing, curtains, and fabrics were made at Weston, as well as fine quality mattresses and the most of the institutional furniture, thus fulfilling the 19th century ideal that institutions be self-sustaining and that people with mental health condition learn a trade. They even had a cemetery on site for those who passed away there. The asylum was located in a rural area where patients would be housed among strangers only, discouraged from seeing anyone they knew. Patients were not even allowed to receive gifts or mail. This was thought to help with the healing. Although the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was built for 250 patients, it wasn't long before the numbers crept up. With multiple beds crammed into rooms, they were once cozy but quickly became crowded. As more and more people were admitted, the staff took incredible actions to house patients. In the 1950s, when the population swelled to 2,600 patients, bed-sharing measures were implemented, and effectively allowed people 8 hours of rest before their beds were given to someone else. So everybody had to share beds, which I'm sure was not sanitary at all. As always, back in the day, patients were admitted for various reasons, and not all were for mental health related. In addition to patients who were admitted for mental health related issues, other admission reasons included asthma, laziness, egotism, domestic troubles, and even greediness. Women who would not listen to their husbands, tuberculosis. Men can even drop their wives off for almost any reason, like wanting to keep a mistress, but wanting to have a wife out of the way, which is ridiculous. Always makes me mad. The way we women were treated, and still are sometimes. All of these misdiagnoses, or I guess improper diagnoses, led to an overwhelming number of patients being admitted, causing the asylum to face a shortage of staff and beds. The overcrowding would lead to horrendous conditions of the asylum, with various reports of unsanitary conditions and lack of heating and lighting. Construction would continue into 1881, then the original plan was complete. The total cost was $725,000, more than $300,000 over the original budget. At that point, more than 700 patients were housed in the building, which was 1,295 feet long and contained 2.5 miles of hallways. I would hate to be a housekeeper there. That's a lot of sweeping and mopping. The walls were 2.5 feet thick, dense enough to muffle screams of even the most tormented soul. A women's auxiliary was built in 1890, and 2 years later, the 20-acre front lawn was enclosed by a Victorian wrought iron fence. A gas well was drilled on the grounds in 1902, making the facility even more self-sufficient. For all the good ideas and making it a state-of-the-art facility for healing, it was far from that. 19th century healing tactics were barbaric, some of which include bloodletting therapy, laudanum, which was an opiate most commonly used to treat pain. It was regularly provided to patients. Seclusion cells and confinement cribs were utilized to control violent patients. Unfortunately, there were innocent victims of the asylum due to misdiagnosed conditions and unfortunate situations. Many spent their entire lifetime at the asylum, only to end up in an unmarked grave on a lonely hillside. Over the years, several auxiliary buildings had come and gone. A tuberculosis building was established in 1930. A large 3.5-story brick unit was constructed around 1935. Many treatments at the time were considered innovative but were pretty horrific. Treatments included insulin shock therapy and electroshock therapy. With insulin shock therapy, patients were injected with large doses of insulin, purportedly inducing daily comas over a period of time. Patients would sometimes suffer seizures before or after or during the coma and would subsequently be obese after long-term treatment. Electroshock therapy was pretty horrific too at that time. It's still used today, but has been improved upon immensely. So, patients over the years set several fires, including a large fire in October 1935, which ravaged the hospital's 4th floor. Remarkably, no one was killed in the blaze, and the wing was rebuilt for $155,000 by the Works Progress Administration. In 1938, the asylum was called home to 1,661 patients. That year, a survey reported that the hospital housed people with epilepsy, alcoholics, drug addicts, and non-educable mental defectives among its population. In 1949, the hospital had some 1,800 residents. That year, the Charleston Gazette reported that the facility had poor sanitation and insufficient furniture, lighting, and heating in much of the complex. If you listen to the lobotomy episode I did, you know that the treatment, which was used in the 40s and 50s, basically a doctor would stick an ice pick-like object through the orbital plane and try to break connections through the lobes of the brain. In the 1950s, Dr. Walter Freeman performed a bunch of them there at the Trans-Allegheny Asylum. At its peak in the 1950s, the hospital's population reached 2,400 patients, more than 10 times the number it had been built to accommodate. In the rear of the central unit are several brick structures that house several units, such as a kitchen, dining facilities, laundry, shops, a forensic building, and storage. Many of these were built during this time. This was likely one of the worst times for patients at the hospital, with overcrowded and understaffed conditions. And as the asylum became more crowded and the staff were outnumbered, conditions worsened and more incidents occurred between the patients. But the biggest problem was definitely overcrowding. The inability to handle the large population led to an increase in violence. To deal with some of the more violent, uncontrollable, and severely mentally ill, it is said that many of them were kept in cages. Several patients and staff members met violent ends, and it was overall a bad situation all around. In 1985, the Charleston Gazette again exposed the asylum, reporting the court-appointed inspectors found the asylum to be dirty and unkempt, with many patients left naked and confined to dirty wards, with bathrooms smeared with feces. Ugh, so nasty. The asylum experienced a massive population reduction in the mid-80s as a result of modernized medical practices, and it finally closed its doors in 1994. So that's a brief, or not so brief, history about the asylum. If you've been listening, you know my descriptions are usually not brief. A place with that many patients is, and with hundreds of deaths, and even deaths of staff members, some of these deaths really violent, it's a place that's bound to be full of spirits and ghosts. The tales of hauntings of unearthly spirits lurking within the building on the grounds started long before it ceased to be a hospital. After a few decades, the reports of hauntings and the sounds of restless souls become commonplace. Some workers were said to have stayed only a few days, quitting after hearing inexplicable noises such as the squeaky wheels of gurneys rolling along a tiled hallway. Thousands were committed to the asylum, and many died there. Over 2,000 people are buried in the cemetery. The spirits are numerous and range from Civil War-era ghosts to children to ex-patients and staff. Murderers, rapists, and other violent offenders are said to continue to dwell in the building, along with others whose only crime was depression or substance abuse. excuse me. Sightings include staff and visitors seeing ghostly figures walking through the hallways at night and glimpsing shadowy figures at all hours. One doctor even reported a spirit following her home and continues to trouble her to this day. Others have reported seeing a ball of light moving in the hallway and spying apparitions dressed in white. I'm going to cover a few of them here. We'll start with one of the most famous ones, Lily. Lily is said to have haunted the 4th floor in Ward R even before the fire gutted it. The original design was changed in the 1930s, yet her presence is still, and strong energy still remains, always talking with ghost hunters investigating the building. I read 2 different stories about Lily. The first one, she was a young patient there wearing a white dress and said to be about 9 years old. Lily likes to play games with visitors and staff as toys move around their own accord and a music box turns on by itself. Legend has it that Lily was a little girl who spent most of her short, sad life inside the asylum's walls. One story says she was dropped off at the hospital by her parents, while a second states that she was born there to a committed mother. She died of pneumonia at the age of 9 and has never left, the only home she ever knew. The other story, with her mother, Lily was born there by Gladys, a patient. This is one of the most prominent versions of Gladys and Lily's story. Gladys was sent to the asylum when she was supposedly raped by Civil War soldiers. When she was admitted, she found herself pregnant. Gladys passed during childbirth, leaving her infant left alone. The nurses in the ward immediately took to the little girl, naming her Lily. According to legend, the child only had let me start over. According to legend, the child only had one home for a very short period of time. When Lily was 9, she contracted pneumonia, which ultimately killed her. Now, people like to visit Lily's room and bring her things like toys, stuffed animals, and candy. Many people state that the toys will sometimes move and the candy will disappear. Many believe this is Lily's way of playing with the visitors. Next is Slewfoot. No one knows how the man known as Slewfoot got his name. Supposedly, he roamed the upper floors and killed and tortured people in the upstairs bathroom. To this day, he haunts the bathroom and the upstairs floor. I also read he had a violent end, being slashed to death in the bathroom, but I only saw that on one place. And really, that's about all I could find about Slewfoot. On the 1st floor of the building, which is called the Civil War Wing, and is the oldest part of the building, is said to lurk a former patient named Ruth. However, it's unknown the reasons why Ruth apparently hated men and had a practice of throwing things at them. Today, her spirit still wanders in the hallways, where people have been pushed up against walls and have heard whistling sounds emanating from the hallways. When the hospital was still in service, a patient named Ruth resided on the 1st floor. Rumor has it that she was extremely cantankerous and had a violent streak. While strapped securely into a wheelchair, she would often scream obscenities to those that walked the halls, be it staff, visitors, or patients. Today, many claim to hear Ruth. People can feel her negative energy all over the 1st floor. Many have been pushed violently on the 1st floor and feel that Ruth is to blame. It is believed that a previous caretaker provoked the spirit of Ruth by daring her to come out. At the time, the caretaker was showing her daughter around the facility. Just as they decided to move on, the caretaker named Sue was pushed up against the wall by an unknown force as her daughter watched on. The asylum was open during the Civil War, and when the war ended, many soldiers were admitted into the hospital. They were put in a wing that was called the Civil War Wing. Most of them ended up dying in the hospital, cursed to haunt the halls forever. People often see them on the 1st floor. The 2nd floor doesn't have any named ghosts, but is full of activity. For a period in the 1970s, the asylum was used as an auxiliary drunk tank, which meant inebriated teenagers could be thrown in with men who were actually mentally ill and violent. At least one young person died this way, dragging his stabbed body down the hallway to the nurse's station just a moment too late. In one room, a man was stabbed 17 times by another patient. Shadow figures have been seen lurking here. In another room, 2 patients committed suicide by hanging themselves from curtain rods. Here, shadowy figures have been seen, and on at least one occasion, an EVP captured someone saying, "Get out." The 2nd floor also housed the children's ward. Many rooms have toys that people have brought for offerings. Many people have experienced things in this ward. The spirits of a double suicide are said to haunt the area where they committed their final acts. Some visitors are overwhelmed with emotions of anguish and grief, while others reportedly feel suffocated upon entering the room. Also, they say it is not uncommon for some to hear their name ring out from the shadows within the structure. On the third floor are wards F and C, the violent male and female blocks, respectively. During Trans-Allegheny's waning years of operation, hospital administrators haphazardly grouped patients that were aggressive and docile together to address the troublesome overcrowding issue. The negligence was problematic for several reasons and has ultimately led to one of the most horrific murders in the asylum history. And this one is really sad, I think. A deaf, mentally handicapped patient named Dean was placed with two vicious inmates named Joe and Big Jim. Childlike in nature, Dean was a beloved member of the hospital community. However, his immature temperament was a nuisance to Joe and Jim. One evening, the two perpetrators beat Dean for his annoying behavior and attempted to hang him with bedsheets from an overhead pipe. Dean was suspended and lowered several times from the makeshift noose, losing consciousness, but still refusing to die. Then Joe placed an iron bed frame on Dean's head and jumped repeatedly, crushing the unconscious man's skull. Dean's spirit is believed to reside in the room where he was so brutally murdered. The malevolent entities of Joe and Big Jim are also reported to roam these halls, pushing and scratching unwary visitors. Dean is known to be a quiet spirit. He has spoken a few times, but any time the shadows of Big Jim and Joe come up, he seems to disappear. It is said when these two shadows show up, the energy in the room changes, causing some people to feel ill and uncomfortable. I just feel so bad for Dean. Like, why would they put such a gentle patient in with somebody like that? It just makes me mad. Also on the third floor is where the nurses were stationed and lived. Here, apparitions of nurses and shadowy figures may be observed. A nurse called Elizabeth is supposedly there. I couldn't find out a lot about her. But it says the other occurrences on this floor include doors that close by themselves, fleeting glimpses of apparitions, shadowy figures, and a number of strange noises that have been caught on EVPs. According to those that research signs of paranormal activity, the fourth floor of the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum seems to be the most mystifying and spooky of all locations. This is the floor where Lily is seen, whom I mentioned earlier. Also, a dark shadowy blob has been observed. The blob has been nicknamed the Creeper. When people have tried to communicate with it with ghost boxes, it has identified itself as a demon. Additionally, there's a very odd spirit that seemingly crawls along the floor. Finally, it is common to hear a banging noise, like the banging on pipes. And in my last episode, I mentioned working in the basement of the hospital and seeing weird things. That's another thing that happened there I forgot to mention. There was always banging on pipes, and it sounded like chains rattling. I wonder if that's the way that ghosts communicate. I'm not really sure. Another ghost on the fourth floor, which many have seen, is a soldier who they call Jacob, who is said to stroll the hallways. Now, I don't know why he wouldn't be on the first floor, since that's where the Civil War wing was, but maybe he was a soldier from a different war. Numerous unearthly sounds have also been heard, including screams inside the electroshock room, banging, mysterious slamming doors, throaty moans, ominous breathing, and hysterical laughter from other empty rooms. Other paranormal activity includes objects that seemingly move on their own accord, and visitors report the feeling of being watched. Also in the kitchen, workers and visitors feel like they're being watched, and during the day when others are around. But imagine being a security guard alone walking the building at night. One was doing his rounds near the kitchen, and he felt it. Like someone was watching him. He felt dread, a common feeling when near negative energy. Then he saw movement behind an open access onto the kitchen. He described it as a grayish figure. He said it looked like a woman because of the shape. Others have reported seeing the apparition here too. So definitely a lot of activity there for such a huge place. And I'm sure there's much more that I haven't even mentioned. So if you check it out, I would like to check it out. They offer tours there March through November. They offer flashlight tours, and around Halloween they have a haunted house. Other events happen throughout the year. They also offer an asylum ball, which sounds pretty cool. The website says, join us at the asylum ball for an unforgettable evening where history, entertainment, and the spirit of Halloween converge in the eerie atmosphere of the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. The asylum ball boasts multiple live bands, a vibrant DJ section, and an outdoor courtyard featuring cozy fire barrels. Explore booths featuring psychics for intriguing readings or enjoy the delicious food options available throughout the event. Express your creativity with the costume or dress comfortably. I mean, if you're going to do it, you should definitely dress in a costume, right? I would. If you decide to check out the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, check out the rest of Weston, West Virginia. Their website says, "We welcome you to Weston and Lewis County, where outdoor adventures, Appalachian culture, and hospitality are strongholds in our community spirit. Lewis County has been a destination for vacationers for generations. The variety of activities, local cuisine, and comfortable accommodations provide the backdrop for a visit infused with slower pace and relaxation." You can visit the West Virginia Museum of Glass, where over 20,000 unique pieces are on display, including a stained glass dollhouse crafted by Lady Jade. The museum features collections from 1860 to the present, with a special focus on the period from 1900 to 1960. The farmstead at West Virginia University's Jackson Mill allows visitors to get a taste of life from an earlier, simpler time. The Appalachian Frontier community has an historic water-powered mill that still grinds cornmeal and wheat flour to this day. The Mountaineer Military Museum is a must-do on any tourist list. This facility, located in the heart of downtown Weston, offers tributes to those who served our country. Have any of you visited? Do you think the place is haunted? Did you feel or see anything? Let me know. As always, this is one of those places I've always wanted to see but haven't. But I do have plans on visiting within the next year. So hopefully I'll be able to report back about that if y'all are listening to me in a year. So thanks so much for listening. Once again, I cannot thank you all enough for your support in all of this. If you listen to me on a platform where you can rate me, please do. As always, if you have any suggestions, comments, please contact me. Facebook is probably the best place, or you can email me at poisonappalachia@gmail.com. Follow me on socials under Poison Appalachia. I'm on X, YouTube, TikTok, Threads, Facebook, all of those. I feel like in Instagram. I forgot Instagram. I'm sad that spooky month is ending. Boo-hoo, my favorite month of the year. But if you're all good boys and girls, the Great Pumpkin may visit this week with a treat. Keep your eyes posted on my social media. Thanks, have a great week, and bye!